Delighted to be joined this afternoon, kicking off our afternoon session with our Minister Peter Burke. Peter, you're very welcome. And
just wondering, is that your new team tune, is it?
Oh, well, we have a few of them, it depends. But certainly we'll play that when you and I are together from now on, if that's helpful. But Happy New Year, and delighted that you could join us here this afternoon as well. So we've had a very productive morning actually, and kicked off with your colleague Jack Chambers earlier today as well. But maybe I might start with, because you've had a very busy morning as well. You've had the announcement of the capital plan and earlier today. So maybe you might just share with the audience here, what's been announced this morning in line with the National Development Plan.
Yeah, just first of all to wish everyone a happy new year. I hope everyone got a bit of time with your families over Christmas, and genuinely really appreciate all the work of the organisation over the last 12 months, and hopefully look forward to an exciting year ahead. So this morning we had our capital plan for the department, which is looking at our capital expenditure over the next 5 years, about €4.7 billion, which is very significant. Looking at growing and scaling our indigenous economy, which we'll have some very exciting announcements there in relation to our seed and venture capital, our new Startup Ireland, which I think will be very important. With about €1.3 billion on the side to attract foreign direct investment, securing further investments, which will be very important. A lot of strategies next year, building on a very busy last year with our competitive action plan. We have also had our semiconductor strategy, which is very important. And this year, hopefully, John Newman is working hard over there on a life science strategy, which will be very important, working with the Department of Health. Tourism, very exciting, 400 million for it over the next 5 years, really working at Ireland's largest indigenous sector, the 46,000 SMEs that are in it, 230,000 employees. We've done a lot of work with our new era for Irish tourism. Our plan over the next 5 years to get between 6 and 7% growth in the sector, be it in less mature markets, and also diversifying our markets as well. And then the innovation piece, the disruptive technologies, breaking into new markets, which is going to be critical with our tech centres, with our important projects of European interest, and working to ensure that we're trying to capture that wave of innovation, which will be very important, and then keeping an eye on our decarbonisation journey, which is about 300 million to live up to our 35% reduction by 2030, which will be a big challenge.
Absolutely, and just to say, look, we very much welcome, I think, the ongoing support from you and from the department that I mentioned earlier today in part of my remarks. Because as we look forward, having those strategies and plans, but they need to be resourced financially and resourced with people. And I just want to just thank you again personally and the department for the support you've given us as an organisation over the last number of years, because we're starting to see that come to fruition, and we need to continue to build that in that activity. And today's announcement obviously speaks to that. It speaks to the next generation sites, obviously is within that at 100 million. It speaks to decarbonisation, which obviously we've seen real investment in decarbonisation in our figures our results that we announced just pre-Christmas as well. So I think it's going to build more layers of advantage and competitive position as well. So maybe before we look forward, I might maybe just, it's always, I suppose, at this time of the year or Christmas, you always take a reflection. So from 2025, it's been, let's call it a roller coaster year maybe in many, many ways, but what's the standout maybe milestone that you see from an enterprise perspective and what we could be building on for the future?
Well, I think we've captured some of the sectors that are strategically important to our success as a country very well. Obviously, to get our competitive action plan and productivity was so important early on in the government's lifespan, which was critical, really to enhance the productive capacity of the economy, working on doing things simpler, lighter and faster, trying to ensure that we have a very solid eye on what efficiencies we need to hive out in the economy. Getting our establishment of our semiconductor strategy was critical as well. I think we can see rewards coming in from that. And which was so important that we were in so many trade missions and in so many boardrooms. I delivered one key message in October. We're going to go heavy on R&D and we're going to publish a CRU paper before the end of the year. And we delivered on both those key asks, and that was very important as well to show that we have credibility as a country that is attracting key investments into the economy. That was very important. And also really to go forward, it's critical that we're keeping a solid eye on those key investments on the capital side, and that's going to be a big challenge in the years ahead. That we're looking at the bricks and mortar. It's great when you drive down the M6 to see Dexcom really taking place there as you look across towards Attenroy. All those key investments are going to be so important in the years ahead.
No, absolutely, and just maybe to drill down on some of those elements. And actually earlier today, we've heard a number of speakers. You talked about the certainty on R&D and the certainty on the CRU, which obviously are so critically important, because we heard from company representatives here in the room what they want is they know that we can't solve every problem today, but they want the certainty to bring that. I think that's the importance in terms of our plans and execution of those plans, and the example of the CRU paper or decision I think mirrors that as well. You also mentioned in your opening statement in terms of R&D and IPCES, and maybe if we cast our net maybe beyond over 4 or 5, maybe 10 years, what's your vision for where you see enterprise going, and maybe from an FDI perspective, how you see that evolving over the next decade?
I think there's huge opportunity in the semiconductor space and in our life sciences. I think if Europe is serious, we have about 6-7% of global supply chain production in semiconductors, which we know through COVID we saw so many shortages in key supply chain areas. And we're very clear in a modern economy, from fridges, from electric vehicles, phones, there's chips everywhere. And, if we look, there's over 90% of advanced chips being manufactured in Asia. And, diversification comes with a cost, but it's important that Ireland and as Europe revises the CHIPS Act now, I think, and with our offering in terms of our large-scale utility sites, that we can say, Ireland is a very attractive place. We have 130 companies working, 20,000 high-skilled workers in the sector, underwritten by 175,000 ICT workers, having blown it out of the ballpark in terms of STEM graduates per capita, in terms of ICT graduates compared with the EU average. We have a very, very strong offering. So I think, if Europe is to be serious in attracting very significant manufacturing and diversification for the globe, I think it's important that we make progress on that side. And also in our life sciences, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity as well. And we can see, the growth in that sector has been very significant. And I think if we have a very strong strategy with the Department of Health, which will be very important, because it is a tightrope that you walk in terms of working with the Department of Health and working with enterprise and incentivising innovation and being at the cutting edge of new medicines versus access and ensuring fair prices. So we need a very strong strategy, and that's an important milestone, I think, in 2026.
We do, and just on that point that you've mentioned about the strong strategy for life sciences, because as we know, and people in the room here know, it's one of our key drivers for the future as well. But we're also seeing how the landscape globally, and we've seen how our nearest neighbour in the UK is probably suffering, let's call it maybe a negative in terms of their strategy around it. So I think for Ireland, it's going to be so important for us. Like we're a small country with a small market, but it's really about the tone of what we set, and I suppose that's going to be, I think, the key component. We had Eli Lilly on the stage here before lunch, and I think that's something we just need to be conscious of in terms of meeting that.
I'm in very close contact with Minister Carol McLeal about the negotiation of new contract, which is very important to ensure that we get a strong balance that does continue to incentivise innovation. But we have a huge amount of opportunity. I think as you look around Europe, and you mentioned the UK, as an economy that's going to be spending about 19.1 billion euro in capital funding this year in 2026, considering that's up about 54% in 2 years, that shows you the scale of ambition that we have as an economy. And when you look out over the next decade, about 275 billion euro, there's not a country around Europe that can boast those type of figures and run a surplus and put money by for times of when private investment may become weak, that you can act in that counter-cyclical measure that we can say by the end of the government's term, hopefully we'll have about 40 billion euro in our sovereign wealth funds. So that's working, trying to be safe, managing the economy, and critically trying to hive out a huge amount of opportunity, particularly in our FDI, but also on the Indigenous side as well, which is very significant, I think, in 2026.
Absolutely, and when you talk about this, that's really impressive. So we're moving at a pace as a country, in terms of investment, in terms of evolution. It'd be just interesting to know, for us as an agency then, what else can we do to assist in that process for government to achieve that? Because, as I say, you can go quickly, or you need to bring everyone with you in that journey. So what else can we do as an agency that might further assist and enable us to make sure we execute on those ambitious plans that we have over the coming years?
I think that close cooperation should be so important that it continues. Working with our clients, I think it's very important that when the agency wins an investment, you keep knocking on the door, working with that client over a period, seeing what the next wave of innovation is, how you can improve in process innovation, how you can, take, for example, the horizontal tax credit, how they can utilise that, and other offerings in terms of training, which is very exciting when you see that 40,000 figure, 33,000 people gone through already in the first year. And with new technologies coming forward, it's so important that we continue upskilling and training. So I think it's very important we keep the eye on it. And then working closely together. It's important as a department, which we do, we all work very closely. And there's some very exciting people in the organisation that I had the privilege of working with over the last 12 months. As a minister, you can't get to meet everyone, obviously, but it is very exciting, and particularly in terms of our Canada trade mission. Deirdre O'Connor there was exceptional, the work we did with her, and Mark Shorten, very exciting people that are on top of their brief and that know the key positions that you need to be advancing to win those investments. And people like that really make the organisation.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. We actually started the conversation this morning talking about the culture and the team that is IDA, and as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, Minister, was I have the privilege of sharing those results with you pre-Christmas, but this is the team that delivers those results, and to do it through professionalism, to do it through being a trusted partner, and I think we need to. It's good to recognise that. A couple of things maybe I might just drill down on for a moment is market diversification, and obviously we have people here from all parts of the world and so forth. What does that look like, or what's your thoughts on that from an FDI perspective? Because market diversification is probably there's two sides to that coin. There's the side from an Irish Indigenous perspective, which we all support. There's obviously the side from tourism, which we haven't talked about yet within your brief as well, and we might do that in a moment. But then the FDI side, which the dynamics can be slightly different in some of that market diversification. And you mentioned one area, actually Taiwan, obviously, earlier on. So just interested in your perspective on market
Absolutely. I think within semiconductors, it's very alive. I think it's one of the areas that, as the EU revises the CHIPS Act, it has to be very clear that its first iteration did not deliver. It did not deliver on the objectives set out by the Commission to reach that 20% ambition. And we have a huge amount of work to do in that regard. In terms of actual diversification, I think is critical. We have 41 trade agreements with the EU, cover 72 countries. On the Indigenous side, last year was the first year we'll go over about €36 billion in exports by Irish-born firms, and that's very significant. And we want to continue driving those opportunities in markets like North America, like Canada, which was, very strongly can see the opportunity that's out there that we have to follow through on this year. I think that's one of the key things when you have an entry into some of those exciting enterprises, you need to get back in and follow through. And also on tourism, as you mentioned as well, we're looking at the Asia-Pacific region, looking at getting boots back on the ground. We've about 21 direct flights in North America, and we'll be following on getting our agency staff back in the market, on the ground, in those local territories. That's going to be so important. So I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. Like, the US is going to be our most valued market, there is no doubt in that, and we have to be always very conscious in that, what we have we hold, and we have to ensure that there are additional opportunity therein. But that doesn't mean that there are other opportunities. And you can see how some countries in a very uncertain geopolitical environment are changing direction. Canada, for instance, is one, obviously. We need to be there to take that opportunity, and government is really resourcing that through our global footprint, and it's important that we all collectively take advantage of that and bring more resources back into the economy from an Irish perspective.
Yeah, perfect. Just a reminder maybe for folks in the audience, the Minister is open to taking questions, so if you want to send something through in Slido, I can pick them up here if time allows. So just a reminder for colleagues. Maybe just to get your view as well, obviously tourism has come into to your brief. And obviously, as you'd mentioned, trade missions and the importance of those. And it's funny you talk about boots on the ground. We always talk about wearing out the leather in our shoes, and that's what we do. That's because that's how you build relationships. That's how you build a trusted partnership. I suppose the question is, how do we make sure we're maximising that synergy, both from an Indigenous and an FDI perspective, and particularly a tourism perspective, as we go forward under the new brief?
Yeah, I think we do it quite well in terms of the FDI sector, and that's not mentioned often enough, because when you go through the supply chains of some of the very significant companies that are here, you can see some of the semiconductor companies have over 900 Irish companies, SMEs, working with them, and that could be from Banagher Concrete to Kieran Steel, that are really deriving huge amount of local value to local people. I always was struck by when I was in Ballinasloe in a local printing manufacturing plant, where there was a guy, family business, managing director, and he said his key client, one of his most significant clients, is a life science company, and he prints the paperwork to go into the bottle of medication. And that's what it means, added value into the economy, that sometimes in the debate, and as we do debate, that is often missed. And critically, some of these companies are here 40, 50, 60 years, so they're almost a staple on the economic landscape. So we have to look at where do we continue to close off that, working with Enterprise Ireland and IDA, a huge amount of opportunity. I think working with our trade missions, bringing tourism in, is an added advantage, that we can do a mixture, working with, what's our Indigenous side, what's our inbound investments we're looking for, and where are our tourism opportunities when we go to a particular location. And we can be strategic about that. But I do believe the strategy we have for tourism is really revolutionary. It is a new era for Irish tourism. We have KPIs with Fáilte Ireland now looking for 7% growth per annum, and we have given the sector 4.5% now under margin. They have to come back and give 7% growth per annum. We'll be really going after that in the years ahead, and ensuring that we lengthen the season, that we're bringing in stronger balance in terms of accommodation. We've about, I think, 11,500 hotel bed spaces now that's under construction for delivery over the next 18 months. That will be very strong. Reducing our dependency on state contracts for direct provision and others in the private sector. We've it down to about 5% now from 13 in November 2022. We must continue along that trajectory to ensure that we're breathing life into these towns and villages, and everyone gets a shake of the sector. So we have a lot of exciting work to do on the tourism side as well.
Absolutely, and this all interlinks at a local level, and I think for IDA, in terms of, we're fully committed to balanced regional development, and it's not just about targets, it's about delivering and making sure we reinvest, and I think that's really what this speaks to. Maybe just to change tack for a moment, and maybe go back to maybe more mundane things of regulation. And particularly, when we had Minister Chambers this morning, and he talked about from an infrastructure perspective. But if I think about broader regulation, and we think about the Draghi report and so forth, it'd be just interesting in your perspective in terms of regulation as it applies, from innovation. What can we do as an agency, or indeed as a government, to try and move that forward? Because it's quite clear that it can act as a protector, but also as a barrier.
I think at the outset of the new commission, President von der Leyen was very clear that you want to do things simpler, lighter and faster. That's why you have so many omnibus pieces of legislation now gone before the European Parliament in key areas that we need to be more efficient as the European economy. We are very much on the back foot in terms of Europe collectively, and we see that in so many areas in terms of, be it licensing and regulation, that has slowed down decision making, which has a very significant impact on investment. We have a very rich market, 500 million people, very significant opportunity, and we stand very much at the political centre of that marketplace, being our common law English-speaking country, very much heart of the political decision making that's in the EU. Ireland has always traditionally been very focused on trying to get compromises, trying to ensure fair play. And when we get presidency of of Europe in July, I think it will be key that we drive that simplification agenda, because it's not moving quickly enough. And obviously chairing Compet will be a big challenge to try and push the boundaries on that. And you can see key areas that we need to make progress, and we have done. And one thing I can assure people, when we move, particularly with Omnibus 1 and 2, we are very quick to take action here, put primary legislation or statutory instruments, taking companies out of scope in a number of these initiatives like CSRD and all those areas, and ESG governance. So we have a lot of work to do on that. And Europe has a huge amount of work. But also we have to be careful, and this week has brought a lot of challenges with some other areas in terms of regulation. So I think we're better off. It's better regulation, it's the interoperability of some of the regulation that we have. Because I think if people have certainty, if we know the rules, if we know the timelines, and investors can get a clear line of sight on that, that makes it a lot easier, and people know what they have to comply with. But if those waters are muddied, I think it creates more of a challenge.
Yeah, no, certainly I think that's where clarity and certainty comes. I think as we know with enterprise and FDI, they can deal with a lot once they know the direction of travel. It's the unknown that causes. And I think it's an area where not just Ireland, I think Europe has to continue to probably sharpen its pencil in that regard. Speaking of that, and obviously, it's this year there's going to be a lot of activity, but there's also the EU presidency, of course, coming to Ireland, and just get your perspective then as to the prioritisation that you see maybe from an enterprise perspective and a department's perspective over that period, what that might look like, and maybe how what can we do to support you as an agency?
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount. First of all, the European Competitive Fund, over €400 billion. That's going to be a very significant part to be negotiated. And watching for areas like own preference or, areas that really compromise the ability of an open economy to do its job and attract investment and not to cause issues with other markets. That's going to be important that we work so hard on that from a competitive front. The simplification agenda is going to be very much front and centre. To seem to be accelerating the revision of the CHIPS Act, I would deem that very important. So it's very critical that we're very much involved in that as a country, having so much of the global supply chain here and having so many of those actors that are key and central to delivery of it in the future will be critical. And then obviously with our life science strategy, it'll be very important outside of that, but that will fit neatly in with the European life science strategy as well. And it's important that we are choreographing these actions where we have our own semiconductor strategy, CHIPS Act being revised, our life science strategy, our EU life science strategy coming forward. All those areas, I think, we're working hand in glove trying to be at the forefront of getting that opportunity. So it will be a very busy 6 months, and we just really have to breathe life into that simplification, and that's easier said than done when you're dealing with Europe.
It is, and I suppose, and that's going to be the challenge for us. Actually, there's a number of questions have actually come in on European presidency, and simplification was actually a number of them. I think that's going to be, I suppose the question then is for us as Ireland, can we take a lead in some of those simplification areas?
And we will.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll be very much the forefront of that. And we've demonstrated that, I think, at a national level where we've worked so hard to reduce the regulatory burden. We're looking at the interoperability of a number of the regulators, and that will be critical in terms of reforming licensing, be it with the EPA, reforming planning, Commission Planola, all those areas that we've really taken significant action, and our action in relation to the infrastructure delivery, which will be so important if we are going to see the benefits of that very significant capital plan that I mentioned earlier. We need to see delivery on the ground. And I think this year has to be a very significant delivery year for the Irish government, where we can see significant infrastructural projects taking shape, where we have the guide rails set in stone for those who invest in our economy, that there are no surprises. You work with us, you see what you get, you know the way your investment is going to be treated, and that we can attract that new wave with our new AI office. It'll be very exciting to get a good footprint, and particularly having an AI summit towards the end of the year. Very much having so many of the key building blocks for artificial intelligence. As we see now, last year we took through over €1 billion in RD&I, where AI was very central to that through cabinet, be it process innovation or so many areas that AI has been a component, where we saw in many instances where our fintech sector has moved very early adapters in the financial services, and to see life sciences and other areas getting involved now, it's very exciting, I think. And Ireland needs to get that piece right, where you have that regulatory balance, where you're incentivising innovation. We do need to hold public trust, and it's also very important that we have sound regulation, but it's just the balance and the certainty. And it's like when you talk about energy earlier on, that I can say now we have our CRU paper being published. We'll bring out our large energy user policy in January, the end of this month. We'll have private wires hopefully published in the first quarter. So those are logical steps that investors can see, well, there is a shortage, but I have options. And you look over to the US, like I was reading recently that the US has something like 19 gigawatts of a shortage over the next 3 years in what it wants to do. And you see the scale that China is putting into its grid. You know, the competitors that we're up against, the ones that offer, you know, common law, certainty, English speaking, we just have to win that race. If we win that race, we're going to be in a good place.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And just to say, Minister, it's great to hear the passion in your voice, that, you know, committed, and I think we've seen that this morning from your colleague as well, is that, you know, there's a conviction here we're going to make these changes, we're going to make that difference, because I think that's what we need, and we see that, and I think that's really heartening to see, because we have the plans, we have the political will and commitment to do it, and we have to implement, and I think a collective is how we implement that, and I think we're here to play our part in that as well. That's really helpful, and I think it's helpful for us as we engage with clients around the globe as well, and obviously, you know, as you travel, you know through that as well, to be able to sit and be able to give those commitments, and more importantly, to deliver on those commitments, and that's what we're seeing as you mentioned at the start. Just interested in maybe one or two, we've probably coming close to the end of our time here, but there was a question from the audience, and I'm just going to change it slightly, because they're asking you to pick
your favorite. Is that bad, is it?
No, they're asking you to pick your favourite child, and as you and I both know, picking your favourite child can become quite difficult. But I'm going to maybe change it a little bit and say, what impresses you most as you engage with FDI clients? You know, what you take away from that in terms of maybe their focus, their culture, how they're looking at innovation or skills? Be just interested in what your perspective is as you engage, because you see clients both here and you see them internationally. What's your takeaways from that? You know?
Yeah, I suppose as a politician, when you're looking into such a broad base of an economic model that we have, you know, if you look at the CSO data published earlier on this week, and you see all 13 sectors of our economy growing, and growing significantly in terms of wage growth, and you look across a balance of FDI clients, you know, it's amazing to see how well they hold Ireland, you know, in terms of all the various different territories that they deal with. They know that they have certainty here, and quite frankly, some can be frustrated in relation to the pace of change in certain areas. But, you know, if you invest in Ireland, the rules won't change significantly next week. Be it, you know, property investments, you know, with our common law jurisdiction, we have a huge amount of certainty that we can offer. I think that's very much appreciated. And political stability over not only this government, you know, over a generation of governments of centre, pragmatic, you know, positive politics that's welcoming for investment, that understands, you know, to have companies here 70, 80 years is saying a lot. It's a huge testament to our country as well, and how much welcome that they are in our landscape. So, you know, it's very hard to pinpoint exactly what, you know, is the most exciting thing. There's a huge amount of you know, talent there in our FDI, and I was very impressed. I was very impressed with how highly regarded the whole in our country.
Yeah, but thank you for that. There's one other question here that's come from the audience, and actually there's one we haven't touched on, which is the whole area of security, and obviously it's getting a lot of coverage for many different reasons. But I'd be just interested from your perspective then, as we look at security, Ireland's security, the focus on security in Europe, where do you see the role from, if you want to call it, an industry perspective or an industrial development agency's perspective in that, and how do we see that maybe evolving? I know this is probably, it's an evolving scenario.
I think we'll have a very big role, industry, without doubt, if we're to grasp that opportunity. Because if you look at Ireland as an open economy, how much we're going to be investing in offshore renewable infrastructure, all our subsea cables. We know the hybrid threats that are very much ever present, and we are obviously have an outsized role in some of the major tech companies and the data that we hold. So I think we should be very much front and centre involved in investment in the defence sector, and you'll see legislation coming through later on to breathe life into that and give the state agencies more power in that regard. And we have to be honest about this, that it's not, you know, a debate about neutrality. Like, you know, Ireland is firmly on the pitch. We have infrastructure. It's worth protecting. We have very significant clients in our country that have a lot of data that we have an obligation to ensure that we're well resourced in that regard. So I think we have to have a fair, level-headed debate on it. It's not something that we're compromising our neutrality. We're investing in our defence forces. We're investing in our capacity, our capability to ensure that our infrastructure is protected. And as a member of the European Union, I think it behoves us to do that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think, and again, because we're just literally running out of time, Minister, I just want to say, look, first of all, thank you for the openness of the discussion here today, and I think for the frankness that you've answered the questions on as well, because I think that's important. As a mature economy, we have to have these conversations, and obviously, as IDA, we're agents of the government. We're out representing, and I think having clear direction from you and from colleagues across government is so critically important. It really helps us in our engagement. So I want to thank you for that. I certainly also want to recognise and thank you for all of your support over many trade missions. And sometimes we have very long days and long evenings.
I never complain.
I know you don't complain. Yeah. You're probably entitled to complain on a few occasions, but you have never complained. And we thank you for that as well, and look forward to continuously working with you and colleagues in the department as well. I know we have a busy period coming up. We'll be in Switzerland in a couple of weeks' time as well, starting to wear that shoe leather again. So we really appreciate that. So please show your appreciation.
Thanks very much, everyone.